Great. Welcome everybody to our Cohort 1 bi-weekly informational meeting. Our first update is a reminder from our early learning team. And Michelle Belanger, are you able to unmute and share, or do you want me to do that?
No, I'm happy to do that, Sandy. Thank you.
There you are.
I know I wasn't sure if I was going to be back in time, so I appreciate you willing to take that over. Just a reminder for those of you that were contacted by me in Cohort 1 about the grant, the PreK Partnership Grant opportunity, the survey and anything like that, if you have questions. So just a reminder about that. That's all.
Great. And Michelle, when is the deadline for them to apply or
So
get in contact?
the survey that we asked for back to indicate interest is due April 7th.
Thank you. And Jen, I will turn it over to you for an update.
Great, thank you. This is just a reminder that the child count is due for the fourth quarter, April 1st. So please try to get that filled in and sent over to me as soon as you can. And reach out if you have any questions to myself or Kim. Paul, thank you.
Thank you. And then we have an update from, or a couple updates, I think, from Erin Fraser.
Wow, this is moving quickly. Okay, so special ed directors, please put your ears on, tune in. Don't bifurcate your attention right now. We have looked into 676 and it does not apply to SAUs. So you will be making a policy in your SAU as to whether or not you want to consider retention as a strategy other than 676. So that's the first thing. Again, retention is a district decision, an SAU decision. But if you need some support with that, please let us know and we will consider helping you. We will help you. Sorry, we're not going to consider helping you. We will help you. The other thing, and this is the most exciting news, you do not have to do a preschool to kindergarten transition IEP meeting because again, that is only for CDS. I will say that if CDS is providing services to any 4-year-olds that are in your SAU, then you would have to have that meeting. So they would have to be, if they're providing, if you've contracted with them, and I don't think anyone is in the position here that they are contracting. If they are, it might be with 3-year-olds, in which case you don't need that meeting. But if you are contracting for services for 4-year-olds, then that meeting through CDS would still occur. But so we just wanted you to know that there is, for you, no need to meet this spring to transition into kindergarten in the fall, nor do you have to provide an additional year of preschool if a child's birthday falls between July 1 and October 15, and all the other requirements of 676.
Who knew that these were going to be additional bonuses to being in cohort, right? So I am sure you are making special education directors very happy today.
I hope so.
Erin, I just have a follow-up question. Sorry, Sue Terrell. I am going to hold transition meetings though for my students who we have under superintendent's agreements that we're transitioning to their home districts because we're in our own collaboration. Does that make sense? I mean, to me, that's just best practice.
It's not required. It is best practice.
Okay. Okay. I will let the other schools know it's not requirement, but I would like to, I guess then. Okay. Thank you.
You could also, Sue, have a different kind of a meeting, like an open house, or you can think beyond the box. But if you think that, especially for students that are more complex, you definitely want to have that IEP meeting, that's a great strategy. it's not required.
Any other questions regarding 676 or pre-K to K transition meetings? No? Okay, we will turn it over to our, oh, wait, pause. There's a question. Does 676 still apply to students in our district being served by CDS? You're muted, Erin.
Sorry about that. If they are 4 years old and transitioning to kindergarten, then you would do a transition meeting. That is if they're potentially in a CDS program. CDS is, in other words, operating and providing all of those specially designed instruction, maybe even the preschool programming, then yes, you would want to have a transition meeting. Again, it's not technically required by the law because the law is specific in 676 to CDS, and it's also with the transition meetings between May and June. That's also just for CDS having the FAPE obligation. So it's not required, but it is recommended if you're going into a public school program from a CDS program, because those programs are self-contained, as we know.
Erin, sorry, one more follow-up question. I have a student currently who is being serviced through CDS. He has a superintendent's agreement to go to a different school district where his parent is working. We would do a transition meeting for him to our district, and CDS said we wouldn't consider 676 for this student until that transition meeting. We operate obviously as cohort 1, but where he's under CDS, technically, they could still 676 him, correct?
The okay, let me.
So the student technically is in a different district, right?
So but he's in a district. Does that district have the FAPE obligation or does CDS?
CDS does.
Then they do have the access to 676.
Okay, so we would do our regular transition meeting as if he was coming to our kindergarten and make a determination at that point about 676, and CDS would continue with the FAPE obligation. Okay. Unless they decided they wanted to put him in our 4-year-old's program, then the FAPE obligation would transfer to us.
Which would be ideal.
Ideal, yes. Okay, just want to make sure so that, because these questions will come up.
Yes. And it is just occurring to me that this is the first time the site directors are hearing this as well, because we just determined this like a day ago and I haven't met with all of you. So you're going to want to go back to your program managers and make sure that they understand that 676 and transition meetings only pertains to CDS FAPE students.
But they wouldn't necessarily be involved at this point, right?
They may or may not, depending if the SAU
Sure.
is contracting for services.
Deb Mullis, did that answer your question or do you have a,
Yeah, no, that was it. I think
okay.
they just needed an additional. That was fine.
Yep, and this is new, so please reach out if there are questions. We know that, as Sue was just explaining, there will be very specific situations that you will want to talk through.
And parents who may have known about this, who are in your SAUs, will likely potentially, maybe it hasn't been discussed with them. I think it's regularly discussed in CDS with parents. And so as you're working with your families, you may not have brought it up. They might not know about it. But if they do, they'll be confused why it is not pertaining to them when it would pertain to them if they were in CDS. So if those conversations arise, please let us know so that we can help, navigate that with you.
Yep, and Beth, oh, go right ahead, Kate.
Sorry. So Erin, I just am thinking of a potential issue in that I believe the students that CDS has been providing services for, I believe that CDS sent out a letter to those families regarding 676, like as they typically do, like ahead of the transition meeting, sort of to the students that would have applied to. So I wonder if something should be sent out with this new information.
I'm getting a strong head shake no from Gail Page. We do not send out any written material to suggest that 676 is an option. I do think it's discussed with families in CDS. I think it's discussed at potentially IEP meetings and maybe, at earlier IEP meetings. But it is not something that is a written global mailing to parents.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Yes. And in fact, if a parent challenged you, which hopefully we could help explain to them why this does not pertain to them, it is, not an issue for you as a SAU because you do not have to provide that contingency. And that's just, me speaking legally for those of you who are thinking, what if this goes to due process? There is nothing in Muser that forces an SAU to enact this rule.
Beth asked if we could do like a little one pager with this information, and we absolutely can do that. We will work on that and get that out to you. And then Sue Terrell asked if they would still count in our child count. Sue, can you unmute and ask specifically, what you're
So
thinking?
if we decided to retain a 4-year-old, so now they're 5-year-old, but we're in a 4-year-old program, it used to be that they couldn't count on our child count. We've done this before for kids that just developmentally weren't quite ready for kindergarten, and they didn't count, but it was the best placement for them. Now that have 4-year-olds, they would still count in our child count, and they would count in our count too that we do on like April 1. I'm assuming they would still be on that
So
count.
if you retain a student, and again, retention is not research-based. It's not something that we globally recommend to anyone. But there are cases where that's a good decision for you and the family for reasons that are not known to me right now. You would count that on your enrollment. That child would count on your enrollment in your preschool, not in your kindergarten.
And we would still put them, Aaron, on our count that's due quarterly to you guys. And they would
Yes.
still count on that? Or would they
For the
only
next
count?
year, right, Sandy?
Sandy's
believe-
shaking her head no, and you're saying yes. So
Well, yes, no. So we're going to clarify that right now for you.
Yep. Let us get some clarification on which count they will be in. I believe it is the school age count.
Not that that's the decision-making factor, but we just
Yep.
need to know as we think about these things. Thank you.
Is Jen, isn't that how that I had a couple in that situation?
Yes. So when this happened earlier this year with incoming children, I believe we made the decision that they would be counted in the regular child count, not the early childhood special education count. But let's double check that decision and get that out to you. Okay. I think we don't have any more questions, but if you do, just put them in the chat. But I do want to transition to our guest speakers. We have Susie Perry and Jackie Hersom here today to share information about least restrictive environment.
Hi, everyone. Susie and I will be presenting on LRE, which I know you're all familiar with. And this information is actually going to be framed within the context of preschool and the mixed delivery system. Next slide, please, Susie. On our agenda, we will start with a brief overview of LRE and the continuum placement options, including the visual that you saw from the Faith in the Mixed Delivery System session a while back. Then we will cover the importance of access to the general education curriculum and non-disabled peers. And then we will close with the IEP team decision making and walk you through that process. Next slide. All right, we have provided a QR code that you can use to access Padlet, and it will provide a space for any questions or comments that you may have at any point during the sharing of information. If anyone wants to take a minute to capture that. Next slide. All right, let's begin with LRE, or Least Restrictive Environment, and what IDEA currently necessitates. Students with disabilities receive their education alongside their peers without disabilities to the maximum extent appropriate. And of course, what we have come to understand as appropriate has changed over time, especially for preschool age children. While programs for school age children are widely spread, and it's not so much as of yet for preschool age children. And then students will not be removed from the general education classroom unless learning cannot be achieved satisfactorily, even with the use of supplementary aids and services. Next slide. And I'm going to turn it over to Susie.
Right, thank you, Jackie. So you have seen this graphic before, the continuum of placement options. We just wanted to reshare that information to talk about how looking at least restrictive environment starts with a child in a regular childhood program all the way over to the left-hand side of the screen and gets more restrictive. And we as districts are required to ensure that that continuum of alternative placements is available to the child should they need it.
All right. In this slide, we have chosen to differentiate between LRE, placement, and enrollment because often these terms are used interchangeably when they're actually different in terms of how they are used in our IEP team discussions and in documentation. So LRE, in particular, is the discussion of programming as a whole. It involves determining the least segregated environment that the child would benefit from and the least intrusive supports that the child would benefit from. Placement is the resulting decision that best fits the needs of the child and their unique strengths as determined from the LRE discussion. So an example of that could be a child may have significant needs, but with supports and services, they can be in a regular early childhood setting, or the placement may be determined to be a self-contained classroom. And IDEA also requires the child's placement is determined at least annually, is based on the child's IEP, and is as close as possible to the child's home. Placement decisions may not be based on the child's disabling condition or label, may not be based on disability program categories, and may not be based on the location of staff, on the funds that are available, or the convenience of the administration. And then enrollment is the actual location of the classroom. And it could be your Head Start classroom, your PreK, public PreK classroom, or a community-based childcare program. Next slide.
So the federal regulation, the federal regulations, we just wanted to post up here again, is that unless the child with a disability requires some other arrangement, the child is educated in the school that he or she would attend if they were non-disabled. And then in selecting the least restrictive environment, the consideration is given to any potential harmful effects on the child or on the quality of services, and that a child with a disability is not removed from education in age-appropriate classrooms solely because of needed modifications in the general education curriculum. So we wanted to highlight that one as we're thinking about children attending programs in this mixed delivery system that we're envisioning across the state, ensuring that that is considered, that program that the child is already in is up pretty high there on your consideration list. Our next, so based on that, as we think about the different locations and programs that the children are attending, you know that you send to us data around preschool environments, and That preschool environments data is here in this chart, that what we call the least restrictive environments data. And we've gathered together 4 years worth of data and then grouped it by each of the different LRE program categories. So the first one that we call 6A is because it has to do with indicator 6 or least restrictive environment data. 6A is the percentage of children that are in a regular early childhood program. And so you can see over the past 4 years that there has been increases in the number and the percentage of children that are attending regular early childhood programs. And if you focus on the bottom part of our chart here, it shows that where we compare with the national average. And so we're close, pretty close to the national average, looking good. That increases have been, we're seeing increases over time. The next grouping is the percentage of kids that are in a separate setting. So this would be children who are in a program where the majority of children are children with disabilities. And so over time, we've been seeing a decrease in that, and only 23% of the total population, and I think we're around 3,000 children, are in a separate settings at this time in our most recent data. And then 6C is the percentage of children who are getting their preschool in a home program. And so that means that they're not attending any other early childhood program. And it is less than 1%. You know, we have it at about, it's probably 0.18 or percent. So the national average is almost 3%. So we're also doing pretty good there. And then finally, 2 other data points that are not part of our annual performance report, but is submitted annually, is the percentage of children that are getting a service only. So these are children who are getting a therapy in a therapeutic setting, such as a speech therapy office, and they're not attending any other preschool program. So that is about nationally 8.5%, and in Maine, we're at about 19% of the kids who are just getting a service and are not recorded as attending any other early childhood program. And then the last grouping is the percentage of children in some other location. So in other words, they have an IEP, they're getting their special education services in a self-contained program, or a program where the majority of kids do have a disability, and but they attend another program in addition to that where the kids don't have a disability. So they're sort of spending putting one foot in a regular early childhood program and another foot in a special education program. So we're at about 20% of the kids that are in that category, and our national average is at about 16% of the kids in that program. So, those are the results. And then I wanted to kind of give you a chance to think about that and share, if you would like, out of these 5 groupings, which children do you think have access to typical peers and the general education curriculum? Which of these groups have access to typical peers and the general education curriculum, which we know is important? So feel free to unmute, to put it in the chat, however you would like to comment on that. So we have 6A. So they do have, in group 6A, they do have access to typical peers and the general education curriculum. Yes. How about in 6B? Do they have access to typical peers and the general education curriculum? Thinking. So if we remember that the definition for this separate settings is that the majority of children have a disability in these programs, there is the possibility that there are kids in those classrooms that are non-disabled, so they could have some access in there. And then as you think about the self-contained classrooms, and the instructional practices and the use of a particular curriculum and the likelihood of that, is that the same as they might experience in a program over here like we're referring to it for 6A. So it's probably not as likely that they have as much access course as 6A, so less. And how about for the children that are receiving their preschool special education at home? As much access, probably less access than in a self-contained setting to a curriculum and to typical peers, if any. Maybe they have some siblings. And then if I look at the next group, when we think about the service provider location, so these children are getting a walk-in speech or in a therapeutic setting, are they getting access to the early learning curriculum? Are they getting access to typical peers? Probably not as much. And then finally, this other last group of kids who are spending some time in a regular program and some time in a special education program, they probably have a little bit more, but still less than if you were spending the whole time in the regular early childhood program. So we just wanted to point that out, that those two aspects, access to typical peers and the general education program, is related to the environment that they are in.
Okay. So why inclusion? Let's talk about access. Phil Strain, Professor Emeritus and one of the authors of the pyramid model, described the importance of children with disabilities being able to access regular early childhood settings. That is, the settings where most of the kids in the class do not have a disability, and that setting has a full, comprehensive, and age-appropriate curriculum. And the points that he made were that high-quality inclusive settings are the only environments with consistent supporting data that show superior learning, and that non-inclusive environments have been shown to negatively impact children's learning. Fully inclusive options beat the alternative at a ratio of about 15 studies to 1. And fully inclusive options have been shown to work for children across disability groups and levels of severity. All right. Next slide. We have a video that we want to share with you. This is Mia, and the regular ed program she enrolled in did not have experience including students in their classroom with the level of support that Mia's IEP determined was needed. This video will walk you through how they made the necessary adjustments and work together to make Mia's experience a positive and successful one.
Hi, we're from Associated Students Child Development Center here at San Jose State University. We are here to provide high quality early education and childcare for all children ages 4 months to 5 years old.
So when Mia first came to the center, she was new to the center. She, from my understanding, was with her grandmother for the whole year. So she has never been at a center, and when she came to the center, she didn't know the routine, the structure of it, and it took her a while to learn that. It took her a few days to understand that and get used to that.
So sorry.
The kids and me, even for myself, it was hard for me to have a child who's non-typical in my classroom, which I've never really had. And then the children were very curious and wondered a lot about her because she didn't look the same and she looked a little different. And basically how I started that is I explained to them that there are differences in the world. Not everyone's the same. We started going into topics about, people in wheelchairs and people of different ages, color, hairstyles, everything. And they started to understand more about differences in the world. And so that kind of built our positivity towards Mia inside the classroom with the children.
So some of Mia's strengths, she loves to be independent. Every time she eats, so she picks up her plate and then put it in the sink. And also she's very social. She loves interacting with all the children that are around her. And she's so funny. And she loves to dance. And I just love seeing her.
The first day, I was so impressed because teacher Linda was her #1 supporter. Oh, she loves her so much. And I just feel amazing just to see that her teacher supported her in everything. And that makes me really happy and excited.
So, of course, in the beginning, Mia, everyone was curious about her. They kind of stayed away because she did have differences. And when I used the buddy system, she built those friendships. Everyone wanted to help Mia.
Look, take quiet.
You're gonna read a book and then sit down?
No. Read a book, sit quiet.
No.
So sit quiet.
Yeah, the book.
Then we go up here to grab the book.
Look. Oh, that was being very friendly.
Go down. I grabbed the book for you.
Thank you.
Mia, here.
So the buddy system not only helped Mia, but also helped other children in the classroom. For Maddie example, she had a hard time in the classroom. She was very wiggly during circle time and hard to focus. But once I implemented the buddy system, it kind of helped her have control of her own body and actually take ownership in helping Mia and being that teacher in the classroom. So it kind of helped overall, not only Mia, but the other children. So it's very helpful. Within my classroom, I use visual aids. I use sign language because not all children have the language development up to their age or, developmentally where they should be. All done. Yeah, we're all done washing hands. Are you hungry? We're going to have snack pretty soon.
She only been here for 2 months in preschool and she has learned a lot. And I know that's something they do here at school after they're done eating or doing other things. They get a book and read it, and she tries to do the same thing at home, which is I'm so impressed to see that in her because I know she's learning all those little things from school.
I just feel like this was also another great experience for our program to, one, know what to look for when we are wanting to serve a child with special needs, to know that we definitely need to have the support of the parent to make this something that's going to be a success story.
The children, within the 2 months that she was here, they learned so much empathy and so much care. They learned differences. They learned that everyone's not the same, being helpful, caring for one another. It really, really, really made a positive environment with her just being here for such a short amount of time. And for her being here, it's possible for any child. And, sometimes we think how are we going to get these children to understand, to care, be friendly, respect one another. And having an inclusive classroom, I think that teaches a lot, and it really does help. My parents even mentioned to me that they've never introduced their child to a child with disability. And so when I did bring it up to the parents, explaining, this is something that we need to teach them now.
Whereas now the teachers and the admin staff feel more confident in using all these strategies from the teaching pyramid, the calming corner, finding all those social stories, the PDAs, all these things that are little steps towards helping them really made a big difference in helping them with their social emotional development. And it showed too, when they did the desired results developmental profile, we had these scores from social emotional development, and they were, on the lower side when we started. And this spring, like, they jumped, and I think we've reached our goal in terms of being able to support each individual child on how to deal with their emotions. And I think it's an important aspect too, because we also educated our student staff and our parents on what we're doing. That in itself gave us more confidence as a program that we can help these families. We can help all these children. We have the right tools now.
I was so excited when Mia graduated from preschool. I wanted to cry. When I saw her walking down the aisle and then seeing her sitting down in the chair was just so heartwarming. Mia, Bercio! Woo! Good job, Mia!
You know, I'm looking for the future, having more children here at the center. Not, you know, and then a little Mia here, hopefully. But yeah, it definitely changes the dynamic of the environment here, and you can feel that as a whole. So I am gonna miss her, and you know, I wish her the best, and I know she's gonna do great. So
I want Mia to be like a regular person, to be included into society, just to see her happy. If she has any dreams and when she grows up, she loves to dance. If she wants to be a dancer or anything, I'll be there to help her and make her dreams come true. Just want to see Mia be like a strong person and be whatever she wants to do, not be excluded from society, but be included and not having that label like, oh, she cannot be in this particular group because she has this. But I'm gonna help her reach her goals and dreams.
All right. Let me make sure my mic is on. Yeah. So we've just watched a video that described how a school with little to no experience adjusted their perceptions and practices and was able to successfully include a child with limited language, social emotional needs, and other knowledge and skills needs into the regular childcare program. So if you were to think about the program in the classroom that she was in, what category of LRE do you think this would be? What were some of the supports that you saw that were successful for this child? And what actions did the adults need to take? What do you imagine some of the IEP team conversations were that led to this choice on the continuum of placement options? I'm going to hold some space here for anybody who would like to share or respond to any of these questions that we put up here, or share any of your own experiences over this past year as you've been working with the children in your programs. And anybody's welcome to share or share thoughts, people on our team, people in the anybody here on the call today. There's some great questions for thought. So let's move on then to the next slide. And once children have, IEP teams have had a discussion about the needs of the child and have identified the program and the least restrictive environment of the child, these, like we saw in the data, are all coded. And I know it's kind of tiny, but if you look here on this flow chart, the IEP, we're recommending that IEP teams start with question like, does the child attend a regular early childhood program? Asking the family where that child is already going. And if they are, we start to look into how many hours per day or per week that the child is attending and where the child receives the majority of special education and related services. All of those, answering those questions and having answers to those questions will determine the code that is used, that is what we depend on to get that data for the least restricted preschool environments data. And as you can see, based on this chart, that we have in the blue category represents programs where children have access to typical peers. That's a regular early childhood program. The majority of the children are children without disabilities. The gray categories are separate programs for the general education side of things and the special education side of things. And they may have some access to typical peers in that category. The green grouping over here is when you answer, does the child attend a regular early childhood program, with a no answer. And these would end up being separate programs with little to no access to typical peers. So that would be examples of a child attending a separate class or attending a separate school. We don't have any children at this time who are in a residential facility as preschoolers. And then finally, the white group is a separate program, no participation with typical peers. So this is that getting services in the home or getting services at that service provider location. So, this flow chart is available on our website and can be helpful for teams to really kind of walk through to determine what the code and the category is as you were making those LRE decisions.
Okay, so now we're going to take a walk through the IEP process for LRE determination. And you can see the chart that the first step is based on the information shared. We would describe the child's current academic and functional performance. IDE regulations require the IEP to include each child's present levels of academic achievement and functional performance, including how each child's disability affects their involvement and progress in the gen ed curriculum, which for preschool children is child's participation in appropriate activities. We would then write goals that will enable the child to make progress on early learning activities to meet developmental expectations. Next, we would describe the supports and services the child would need to ensure access and progress. And lastly, we would select the LRE starting with the least restrictive environment, the general education setting.
We're going to try a little activity here, and you may notice on your screen a little green pencil inside of a green circle, and these are the annotate tools. Once you click on that, it'll bring up a toolbar, and you can use the tools on here to help us to have a kind of a more interactive activity today. And we're going to ask that you read through the questions that are questions that IEP teams might be asking themselves in that IEP meeting as they're determining the present level. So, for example, what are the child's developmental strengths and abilities? Where is the child now? So if you would go through and read those questions, and as you're reading them, choose a stamp. So for example, there is a check mark stamp. and you can check, stamp the question if you feel like your IEP team is regularly asking a question represented by any of the questions on the screen here. So is everybody able to find a toolbar on their screen? And
the
find
annotate feature, Susie, is to the right of your name. There's 3 dots in a circle. If you press that circle, that's where you'll find the annotate feature.
I think I heard you say that where they were. Yes. Oh, it looks like people have found the annotate. Excellent. That is so exciting that everybody's looks like you're using many of these questions in probably one form or another. So that's really awesome. And so of course, you'll be getting a copy of the presentation today and can use these questions and hand them out with your IEP teams for them to consider including those as part of their conversations with their families in the IEP meetings. Look at that. Excellent. Great job, everybody. Well, I'm going to pause us here and then move on to the next screen. I do think I have to clear it. So let me see, clear. So, and move on to the next page. This is a resource from the Early Childhood Technical Assistance Center where their recommendations are that when IEP teams are listing all of the services for their preschool age children. So we have an example here of what this service page looks like from the sample IEP, I think that you have in Maine. So we're recommending that you listen to and consider all the team members when the LRE options are voiced. Consider whether or not the child can be successful in the general education setting with supports and services. So starting all the way over on the left-hand side of that continuum of placement options first. Discuss issues that might prevent the child from benefiting from a regular education classroom. And if the child cannot make progress in the regular early childhood classroom, if the team does not believe that that's going to be possible, even with all of the supports and services, then consider and discuss alternative options on the continuum. Oops, sorry. My heavy-handed mouse.
Okay, thanks, Susie. All right, once the team has discussed and determined present levels and services for the child, the discussion for placement is had. These are some of the questions that can help support this discussion and inform placement. So again, we share these with you because we'd like you to take a minute and just reflect on which ones your team are regularly asking and how they're informing these discussions. right, Susie, can we go to the next slide?
Sure.
And of course, we can't forget that IEP teams are required to include information in the IEP that tells why the child is not in a regular education setting or the extent to which the child will not be involved with non-disabled peers. This information can be included in any part of the IEP paperwork. Using a standard statement is not individualized for each child. So therefore, any kind of additional information would be in the IEP as well that would supplement this. And we have a resources and references page for you to access. And I have my contact information there for anyone who may have any lingering questions. I'm always happy to help.
Thank you, Jackie and Susie. Wondering if there are any questions from the group, and if you wouldn't mind stopping sharing so we can see everybody. There. Okay, it's a quiet group today. I see that there are no questions, but know that you can reach out to us if you have any about this process in IEP meetings. And if there are no further questions or comments, you have an extra 6 minutes left. Give it back to you today. And I will stay on if there are any other questions that anyone has. Thank you.
Sandy, I have a question.
Sure, Deb.
I think there's some confusion about that question, what is the LRE code? And I don't know if it's amongst this group or just in general. But what do you mean when you ask that question, what is the LRE code? Are you referring to the code that people are putting, like the cohort 1 and cohort 2 people are putting on their spreadsheets? Or is it a different code?
I believe, and Susie, correct me if I'm wrong, that is the code that we're talking about. So it's that location code.
Oh, so it's the continuum code. It's the name of the continuum.
Yes.
Okay, I think there might be confusion about that when you ask what's the code, because I think people are they're looking for that specific language. And I don't know, I think there was confusion when we had our program manager meeting about that. And that's the only reason I brought it up. And I didn't want to put it in front of the whole group because
I think it's more of as it relates to CDS, is it a code that we're checking off in sync, or is it something else? Because we were all like, code, what do you mean? We just select the setting and that brings us the LRE. And then we were all like, wait, are we doing something different? And then Dan asked us the question in one of the chats about that. And then we saw the reg, auth, other, whatever, all the long letters of codes. And we were like, we don't have a choice to select that. Like, what do you mean? How do we get these? So I think it's just raised more questions and people not being familiar with the language of what's an LRE code.
Yep. And I don't know what that looks like on the sync system side of things, but the language that we have been using with our cohorts is that. And Susie.
And Jackie and I took a look at that yesterday, and you're right that it doesn't specifically label the code. It just results in that code. They ask it on CDS Sync. It asks a series of questions. And I just think it's important that people know when they choose, is this child in a regular early childhood program or not, that it has implications for the data, and that to be very intentional about through all of the options, because it does result in generate a particular environment code then gets submitted by us to the federal government. And so as we looked at the data that we had, it's possible that, that the data that we have could be, and we're going to look at that this year, what are the cohort schools and how are they selecting, or how are they indicating the environment that the preschool age child is in compared to how it's done in sync. And so my understanding is that as if a school district is using the student information system, that, and I'm not sure what the name of it is, but the IEP program connects to the student information system, which then sends the preschool environments code to the department. So I believe that's the process, and maybe we need to look into that a little bit further to kind of map that out to make that more explicit. But great question.
Any other questions? Oh,
Bye, guys.
thank you. Thank you. Have a good evening.